could not remember what happened to him on the moon, on Apollo 14, and he went to the famous hypnotherapist Robert Masters, whom I knew while he was alive, and Robert Masters told me that Mitchell came to him very troubled because he couldn't remember what it was like to be on the moon, and they took him through a deep amount of hypnotherapy to recover the memories, and they never recovered them. Because they weren't there. And Buzz Aldrin, in his book Return to Earth, which he wrote about the Apollo missions, he talks about the one-year anniversary of Apollo 11, and he's on the stage at Las Vegas, a big celebration for the one-year anniversary, and a reporter says, "Hey, Buzz, come on, tell us the truth. What was it like to be on the moon?" And in his own words, and you can read it in the book, he says, "I started quivering, my legs got weak, I wanted to throw up, I went out, I couldn't speak anymore, I went out into the alley and smoked cigarettes until I could recover." So he was clockwork oranged. As soon as the subject came up, he got ill. This is why Neil Armstrong won't do any interviews, because he's probably going to get sick talking about it. Yeah. And, so this is, Kubrick was telling us about the mind control that was going on before we actually even knew there was such a thing as mind control. And the same thing, Barry Lyndon is about, again, getting close to the elites, but never really being accepted by the elites. You can have the name of the elites, you can have the look and the mannerisms of the elites, but you could never get in. Barry Lyndon could never really get into the elites. The Shining is a story of the Apollo missions and a lot more. Also pedophilia, which is another recurrent theme within the work of Stanley Kubrick, which sits under the surface. But it may be that one of the reasons that Stanley was offed was that the real story of AI was going to be a story of pedophilia cults. And they really didn't want that one to get out. So I think he was planning a 1-2 punch. He was planning an eyes wide shut AI punch that was going to not only, solidify his stature, but was going to reveal the final secrets of this occult society, and he was snuffed out. Spielberg took the script and rewrote it and put out a pathetic film, and the rest is history.
We know obviously that, as you say, Spielberg took over AI, and there's probably very little left of what Kubrick worked on in that movie. But more curiously, we know that Eyes Wide Shut wasn't really completed as well, wasn't it? Now there was many parts missing, there were scenes missing, and certain things to me to this day when I watch the movie doesn't make sense, and I wonder what portion they left out there. What do you make of that, Jay?
Well, I think they left out the monarch programming part. I think that Nicole Kidman was at the orgy, for instance. I think she was wearing a mask, and she was there when Tom Cruise takes off his mask. I think that the Hungarian is at the beginning of the film that's dancing with Nicole Kubrick is part of this group, and he seduces her, of which they cut out. I think that the entire scene at the end with Sidney Pollack has been completely re-edited, and there's a series of dream sequences which I saw when I was in France before the film was released, which are definitely removed, and these were eerie, strange monarch programming type scenes with Nicole Kidman, which were really scary, and they vanished into thin air. This assistant who called me told me that Stanley was really worried about certain parts of Eyes Wide Shut, and that the people running the studio would be offended. But he had a contract, an ironclad contract, with Warner Brothers that said that no one could touch his films. And so the only film of Stanley Kubrick outside of Spartacus that the editing was not done by Stanley is Eyes Wide Shut. And that's a bloody shame. And I would have loved to have seen the movie, but you can tell that the movie isn't done by certain peculiarities which any filmmaker knows, which is if you watch a film, there's this aggravating, continuing repeating of lines. So somebody will say, I saw you at the party last night. And then Tom Cruise will say, the party last night? Right? These kinds of things. Mm-hmm. These are things that you shoot for good acting, but you cut out in the editing process. Right? This repeating of lines.
Right.
It's a movie thing to get the actors relaxed into their role, but you cut it out. You don't have them repeat. And so we know that Kubrick had at least one more pass on the editing bench, at least, before the film was going to be released. And they just went in with a meat cleaver and chopped out all the important stuff and left in all the mistakes. I don't know why, you know.
Yeah.
But well, I do know why. And so you look at it and you can see there's this continuous thread underneath all of his movies, which is about a cult of people who run the world, and what unites this cult, according to Kubrick anyway, is an overarching obsession with children and sex.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but that's what's going on. And when I get into the third film, I'm going to lower the boom on that, and I'm going to prove it beyond any shadow of a doubt. And the few people I've shown it to were almost sick with nausea after I showed it to them. And Kubrick was definitely putting it in there because, you see, here's the thing about Kubrick. He knew what was going on, and he wanted us to know what was going on, but he couldn't tell us because his wife and his kids would get killed, okay? Or him. I mean, maybe he died. Who knows? So he put these things into his films knowing that they wouldn't be discovered until long after he died.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then the films would be out already, and there's no way you could put the genie back in the bottle. So all it needed was one person to come along and say, hey, have you ever noticed this and this and this and this and this? And then the picture emerges of what is being said to you, and you realize that Stanley Kubrick is laying it all on the line, telling us exactly what's happening, and it's really exciting.
Pedophilia. I always wondered what some of the reasons for this activity is. This is definitely, one of the threads that is running through the whole idea of an upper establishment and an elite. Now, when you work with this, have you come to any kind of conclusion when it comes to why? There's two different scenarios as far as I see it here. One is this is being done in order to blackmail the people in the network. This is a way to have a hold on people who are joining this inner circle that you talked about. The other branch to this is that this have ritualistic, satanic aspects in nature and at the core of it. Maybe both are right, maybe both are wrong. What do you make of this, Jay?
Well, I would say both are right. It is definitely an energy-sucking occult archon thing, which seeks to destroy innocence. Pedophiles are not turned on by young children. Pedophiles are turned on by the idea that they can destroy that young child's innocence. Okay? That's what they like. And that's archonic. That's a demonic archon draining the innocence out of someone kind of thing. And this is what they were doing at the sex orgy in Eyes Wide Shut. And if you really examine the film Lolita, you can see that Peter Sellers and his lady companion are part of a pedophile network that are running down children and trying to get James Mason into their pedophile cult. And he's so naive he doesn't realize that he's being invited into the cult. Okay? And he's just, his love for Lolita is so strong that he's just blinded by it, and he doesn't realize what he's being told by Peter Sellers and his lady companion. And again, later in Eyes Wide Shut, when Tom Cruise comes to the costume shop and finds out that the girl there is not really an innocent at all, she's part of her father's pedophile service. And so, It's both. It's how do you compromise, which, you know, maybe even Stanley had been compromised. It's entirely possible. And another thing which is interesting about all this, which I'll get into in the third film, is that all through Stanley Kubrick's films are these teddy bears. They're everywhere in all of his films. At the very last, I think it's the last shot of Eyes Wide Shut, is Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman watching their daughter walk down the aisle in the shopping store, surrounded by bears, teddy bears. And if you type in pedophile and bears on Google, you'll discover that there's a insignia called pedo bear, which is what pedophiles use to tag a kid who might be interested. Okay? And it's a little teddy bear. And if you go further into this, you find out that pedophiles call them pedophiles who are hairy are referred to as bears. Okay? And frankly, Stanley Kubrick comes off as a bear when you look at him, okay? Now, I'm not saying that he was a pedophile. I don't think he was. But I think the pedophiles referred to him as a bear because he was hairy. And don't forget that Arthur C. Clarke is a notorious pedophile, who was one of Stanley's best friends in London at the time of making it 2001. And so we see that he's hanging out with Arthur C. Clarke and his group of people who are mysteriously linked into the German scientists that Arthur C. Clarke is trying to get into NASA in the early 60s. And you begin to realize that there's a deeper connection here between Arthur C. Clarke's predilections and NASA. And, I mean, it gets really strange. I mean, there's all sorts of odd things going on inside this story, that don't seem connected, but actually they may be. For instance, one of the things that drove Jim Garrison crazy in the Kennedy investigation, in the assassination of Kennedy, was that right before he got the job at the school book depository, Lee Harvey Oswald was working at a company called Riley's Coffee Company in New Orleans. And when Garrison went to talk to all the employees at Riley's Coffee Company about Lee Harvey Oswald, he discovered that there were no more employees there, even though it was only a year or two later that knew Lee Harvey Oswald. So he decided to track down these ex-employees and find out where they were and talk to them. And guess where they all went? They all moved to Houston and became members of NASA.
Okay.
The strange thing to move from an employee of a coffee company to an employee of NASA, I find.
Sure.
And Garrison went to his death. He wrote me a couple times about this, and he went to his death trying to figure out why there was this NASA connection everywhere that he looked, including Texas, where Kennedy was killed, which is Johnson was, really NASA's senator. That's what he was called. And so you look at this and you can see that, you look at Barry Nelson at the beginning of The Shining, the manager of the Overlook, and he has a toupee that makes him a dead ringer for JFK, okay? And you start looking at all this stuff and you realize that he's trying to tell you this, right? And it just gets stranger and stranger. I mean, I have a list of all the credits of the people who helped Stanley in 2001, and it is a military industrial complex list of all the criminal companies that developed these weapons for the United States. That's who helped him. Why would they help him make a science fiction film? Companies generally just don't contribute employees to other private enterprises for free. So, why are they helping Stanley? Why are they all getting together and helping him? And the answer is because they're fleecing United States people